Welcome back. I'm Eric Sapanik, this is John Caro, and this is the Gold Spot.
Today, our country is operating under the application of what's called modern monetary theory. What does that mean? Our government is functioning on the theory that the more debt we have, the better it is. Janet Yellen, the Secretary of Treasury, called debt an asset. And what that means under modern monetary theory is that if you have a lot of debt, you can raise taxes to cover the debt. What we're seeing now are the predictable consequences of overspending. Our Congress has no sense of responsibility. They just keep creating more and more obligations. And the result has been we're starting to see pushback from some of the more important players in the public and private sector. Eric, you were looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. First of all, we talked about Jamie Dimon coming out, and he said, quote, that, the debt is going to be the most predictable crisis in U.S. history. So that's a pretty big statement. More importantly, we just saw Jerome Powell come out in a 60 Minutes interview. Now, the majority of that interview, if you watch it, was more, softball questions and kind of it was kind of a Valentine's Day promotion for the Fed and the policies that they're enacting, saying how great inflation isn't that bad anymore, meaning the rate of inflation, like we talked about, inflation itself is here to stay and it's not transitory, as he admitted during that interview. So prices aren't going down, people, and that's all there is to it. But how fast prices are going up is not as bad as it was. So therefore, that helped bring gold prices down softly. I mean, we were just below $2,000 per ounce. So that was one of the factors that happened with some of the jobs reports that came out and things of that nature. But a bigger problem is when we're talking about the debt itself. And Jerome Powell said this when he was asked about the debt, because we're at 34 trillion and counting. We are on this rocket ship, which is taking us to a whole new level of debt. And he said this, quote, "In the long run, the U.S. is on an unsustainable fiscal path. And that just means that the debt is growing faster than the economy," end quote. So my question is this, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about the CBO numbers, but what does that mean, the long run? John?
The long run for most of these guys means it's not going to happen until after I'm out of office. They're passing on the problem to the next generation. If you and I ran our lives that way, it would be a disaster, but they just don't seem to care. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, crunches the numbers for Congress. It's actually a bipartisan bureaucracy. And they just published their latest findings. And what they're predicting is that the national debt is going to reach $144 trillion by 2053. That's 30 years. And again, to answer your question about the timeline, none of them are going to be around to pay the piper when that happens. That's what they're projecting. And there doesn't seem to be any way to get the attention of the members of Congress on this. And it's just going to keep going. And again, if you ran your life or your business that way, you wouldn't be here.
I think one of the other things when people talk about the long run, I think what we're doing is we're trying to make it sound like it can't happen in our lifetime.
Correct.
But 144 trillion in debt, is it possible to even get to that level without the dollar collapsing along the way, with the BRICS nations forming? I mean, Putin himself said that during his interview with Tucker Carlson, that weaponizing the dollar doesn't make sense because the dollar is our largest asset and what does keep us ahead of the rest of the world's economies. These are all things that I don't think people are really thinking outright. The fact that they go, well, this can't happen in my lifetime. It's just not possible. But at the same time, if you remember back in the 2008 crisis as well, no one predicted it, except for somebody like maybe Ron Paul and a handful of others that actually saw the writing on the wall. But everyone else, even as the ship was sinking, was, no, everything's fine. Keep your money in the stock market. Everything's good. You're never going to get somebody whistleblow before things go really bad. It's not going to happen.
No, and you can see it in the behavior in Congress. You know that old cliche, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and hoping for a different result. They get the same result every time, and we're going to pay the piper down the road.
I think at the end of the day, the most important thing to look at is the fact that the heads of the largest financial institutions in the world all agree upon one thing. The direction of our debt is unsustainable.
Correct.
Period. The question is, when does that become a problem that crushes the foundation of the dollar?
Well, and it's going to happen quickly. It's not going to be a slow decline. At some point, we're just going to go off the cliff.
And I mean, I think that's, I don't know how fast that is. Maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 4 years. So given what's going on, you might want to take a look at the Modern Monetary Theory report that we have. You can go ahead and request that right there. We're happy to go ahead and send you out a copy if you haven't already read it. John?
I think it's worth reading again if you have read it, because we're living it live. And we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It could be tomorrow. It could be 10 years from now. But it's going to happen.
All right. With that, we're going to sign off. We'll see you next week right here on The Gold Spot. If you enjoyed today's Gold Spot, like or subscribe to both our YouTube or our Rumble channels. Also, comment below if you have any questions or if you want to hear us talk about something specific in a future video.